In 2000, the United Nations Millennium Summit culminated in the adoption of the Millennium Development Goals, a set of specific developmental targets to which all 193 United Nations member states committed themselves. The MDGs were important because they represented a broadening of the idea of development by the international community. The Millennium Development Goals focused not on economic development, but on promoting social development and on improving the human health and environmental sustainability. The MDGs also provided specific measurable targets to be reached by 2015. In doing so, the Millennium Development Goals provided concrete measures of progress in achieving goals like environmental sustainability and human development that can sometimes be fairly vague. There were 8 Millennium Development Goals, each of which encompassed several targets. Broadly, the 8 Millennium Development Goals are eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, achieving universal primary education, promoting gender equity and empowering women, reducing child mortality rates, improving maternal health, combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, ensuring environmental sustainability, and developing a global partnership for development. Let's look briefly at the goals and explore some of the targets. You need not remember all the specific targets and indicators, but I list them on almost all slides to give you a sense of the scope of the undertaking. If you want to read more about the specific goals, targets, or indicators, please feel free to pause this lecture. Goal number 1 is to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. We usually understand extreme poverty as people living on less than $1 a day. As a result, for Goal 1, 3 targets are specified: halving the proportion of people living on less than $1 a day, achieving full and productive employment and decent work for all, and having the proportion of people who suffer from hunger. Note that for each of these targets, the specific indicators are proposed to evaluate progress towards that target, and more broadly, towards the overall target. For example, Target 1B, achieving full employment, is measured by 4 indicators: the GDP growth rate per person employed, the employment to population ratio, the proportion of employed people living on less than $1 per day, and the proportion of own account and contributing family workers in total employment. Goal number 2 is to achieve universal primary education, ensuring that both boys and girls have access to a complete course of primary schooling. Goal number 3 is to promote gender equality and empower women. While it focuses on the reduction of gender disparities in primary and secondary education, the indicators include broader measures of gender equity, including the share of women in wage employment outside the agricultural sector, and the proportion of seats held by women in the national legislature. Goal 4 focuses on reducing the child mortality rate. Goal 5 focuses on improving maternal health and includes the availability of family planning as part of reproductive health. Goal 6 is to combat HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases such as tuberculosis. Goal 7 focuses broadly on environmental sustainability. While the targets for Goal 7 are fairly vague, the indicators give a sense of how sustainability is understood in this context. They include cutting CO2 emissions, maintaining forest coverage, ensuring protection of marine and terrestrial species, providing access to safe drinking water and sanitation, and reducing the number of people living in slums. Finally, Goal 8 focuses on establishing a global partnership for development. This goal encompasses improvements in aid practices, cuts to tariffs and subsidies in the developed world, and the provision of debt relief. It also includes specific measures to address the unique challenges faced by both landlocked and small island developing countries. Goal 8 also includes measures to promote the availability of essential medicines and to ensure access to communications technologies in the developing world. Now remember that one of the main reasons the United Nations established the specific measures was so that it could track progress towards meeting the goals at the national and international levels. So how are we doing? Progress is uneven. It looks like we'll meet the goal of having the proportion of the population living on less than $1 a day. But as this graph suggests, this success is largely because of China's rapid economic growth. But in sub-Saharan Africa and West Asia, the proportion of hungry people continues to increase, and globally, the number of hungry has increased sharply as a result of the 2007 global food crisis. The abolition of school fees imposed as a result of structural adjustment and the expansion of free lunch programs in sub-Saharan Africa has improved school enrollment levels, but the dropout rate remains high. As a result, while some progress has been made, it appears unlikely that the target of ensuring all children receive at least primary school education will not be met. Similarly, with respect to goal number 4, reducing the child mortality rate, progress is being made, but not quickly enough to achieve the proposed 2/3 reduction target level. Rates have halved in Latin America, North Africa, and Asia, but remain high in parts of Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Improvements in maternal health have followed similar patterns, but not following as fast enough to reach the proposed targets. Progress has been uneven geographically. While East Asia, driven especially by China, has done well in meeting many of the MDGs, South Asia, Oceania, and Sub-Saharan Africa have made much less progress, as this map suggests. To be clear, there have been some real successes that should be celebrated. Primary school enrollment has reached 90% in 8 out of the 10 regions, and the gender parity rate in primary schools has improved to 95% in 6 out of 10 regions. Deaths from measles were cut by 1/3 between 2000 and 2006, and the vaccination rate for children in the developing world exceeded 80%. And 1.5 billion people gained access to clean drinking water. But there remains much to be done, and the MDGs have been subject to some criticism. Levels of aid promised as part of the MDGs have not materialized, and the developed world will certainly not meet the goals of doubling aid to Africa or of meeting the 0.7% of GDP aid target established in 2000. And yet, in public opinion surveys, Americans sharply overestimate the size of the foreign aid in federal budget. Public opinion surveys regularly ask Americans what percent of the federal budget they believe goes to foreign aid. The median answer received on these surveys is usually around 25%. When asked how much they think should go to foreign aid, the median answer is 10%. In reality, only 1% of the federal budget, representing about 0.2% of 1% of GDP, actually goes to foreign aid. Progress towards meeting the MDGs has also been set back by the global financial crisis and the global food crises in recent years. The financial crisis resulted in a sharp decline in economic growth rates in the developing world, pushing an estimated 100 million people back into poverty as per capita incomes fell. Similarly, the 2007 food crisis pushed more than 150 million people into hunger, undermining progress towards meeting goal number 1. Feminist scholars have critiqued the MDGs for compartmentalizing gender into a couple of categories rather than integrating it throughout the targets. When we look at target 1C, for example, there's no mention of gender. Empirically, we know that women represent about 2/3 of the world's poor and are disproportionately represented among the world's hungry. Because of social structures and cultural traditions, women are usually the first to go without food during times of shortage. About half of all pregnant women in developing countries, according to the World Food Program, suffer from iron deficiency, increasing their risk of dying from hemorrhaging during childbirth. Further, poor maternal nutrition can lead to underdevelopment of children in utero, increasing the risk of infant mortality rates. Yet despite the importance of maternal nutrition in achieving not just Millennium Development Goal number 1, but 4 and 5 as well, female malnutrition is not specifically targeted. Others warn of the accuracy, or more accurately, the inaccuracy, of statistics used to measure the MDGs, observing that in many developing countries, there's a lack of capacity to collect regular updates on the 60 measures used. Indeed, you'll remember from earlier in the course that GDP is often inaccurate because of the necessary data is not collected or updated regularly. Now imagine to try collecting an additional 59 measures. The prospect is unlikely, particularly in the area of declining government resources. But perhaps the most powerful criticism came from the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Olivier de Schutter, who observed that The Millennium Development Goals are laudable political commitments that have been useful in mobilizing money and energy, but statistics are not a substitute for politics. States can achieve these goals sustainably only when they are guided by human rights obligations that define which actions should be taken and by whom. And that is the real challenge.